I'd like to welcome you now to part 4, session number 4, which continues where session number 3, or part 3, stopped. I will say that they, meaning the seekers, are not aware of the fact that once we have in some way given ourselves or dedicated ourselves to a life of service to higher positive forces, it can bring about that kind of change in our lives. In other words, it may surprise us, as we said earlier, that some of these are not always that much fun, that interesting, or that positive from a certain point of view. From a Western perspective, for example, when we ask God or the Christ to come into our lives and take us and make us what He would have us be, the changes that can come can sometimes, relatively speaking, seem somewhat sudden and often unexpected. It is not a casual thing to give yourself in dedication to God in such a way. It is a very serious matter. God is not some anthropomorphic being who arbitrarily interferes in our lives for His own purposes. God has set up the law of cause and effect, often called the law of karma. Now this is the same law that says, as you sow, so shall you reap. And He normally never interferes in the individual lives of humankind unless, and this is a very important unless, that person asks God or the Christ to come into their life, take them, mold them, make them what He wants them to be, and use them in His service as He will. This must never be done as a thoughtless, casual act. It will change your life. If you make that decision and then ask that important question in the manner indicated, and you truly mean it, then God can and will, either Himself or through His agents, come into your life and work with you for that purpose. The changes that come will ultimately be for the better, but for some it may not seem like it at first, however, because, depending on your personal situation, it could continue to bring changes in your life for years to come. The reason for this is because when God or His higher positive forces begin to prepare us for a life of service, one of the things that is usually done is to clear the slate, so to speak, where our karmic debts are concerned. This allows us to serve unencumbered by that karmic burden. Depending on what we have on our karmic slate, so to speak, to be worked through, things can become very difficult at times, even though God or those higher positive forces working with you as His agents to properly resolve these matters, we usually try to be as gentle as possible. It is important to note that we should try to learn as much as we can from all that happens to us at such times. Some people have said that their lives almost seem to be turned upside down for a time, while others have not found it to be quite so difficult in that way. It depends on what karmic debts each person may have. If this is something that you believe you should make the decision to do, or if you have in fact done this, then you can now have a better understanding of these things. Do not forget that patience and prayer and a good heart will be of significant help in seeing you through difficult times. Once again, it should be restated that one of the most important reasons that we reincarnate on this earth is to experience life's problems, overcome life's problems, master life's problems, and thereby, during that process, learn the lessons that are associated with those life situations. This is why we continue to decide to return here time after time until we accomplish these important goals. As I've tried to make plain here, this is not easy. It is for this reason that I usually recommend to people that they pray often, especially during difficult times. Pray that you will learn all that you need to learn from those things which happen to you. Pray that you'll be guided and strengthened to approach and deal with these problems in accordance with the will of your guide, probably your higher self. Or pray to God to guide you and to approach and to guide you so that you will approach and deal with the problems in accordance with His will, if you prefer. You should also resolve and pray to do all that you can do, and to do the best that you can when working through those times that bring life difficulties. When you pray about these difficulties, it is important to always try to pray for greater strength, not to pray for fewer problems. The problems are why we come here, to deal with, resolve, and master and overcome. Finally, try to approach life with a good heart, meaning with a heart that is looking more and more toward service as time goes by, and less towards self, as well as trying to be a person who always does his or her best to do the right thing when dealing with others. If you do your best to do all these things, and do your best to think or do no ill toward any other, and do the best you can to approach others with an attitude of tolerance, compassion, and universal love, then I do not believe that you can possibly help but derive very great benefit. I'm talking about spiritual benefit as well. All these problems that you deal with successfully and master in this life are problems that are then behind you, and they will therefore not be waiting for you in the future, either in this life or in some subsequent lifetime, or if they should be present, you're extremely unlikely to have difficulty dealing with them. And no one should expect to attain all these goals overnight. It just isn't going to be done. But there's no doubt that they are extremely worthwhile goals, and by continuing to seek and to live a life of service, we are creating a better future for ourselves and for our world. If you're already doing all of these things, then you're making a great deal more progress than you know in getting life's difficulties behind you, and then accomplishing the goals, whatever they may be, that you have come here to accomplish in this life. And when we talk about life difficulties, some of the most common problems that many people deal with in this life are a result of their interactions with members of their own family. Excuse me. And that's especially true of those involving parent-child relationships. Remember that we each choose our parents. The higher part of us, our higher self, does so before we're even born. The parents that we choose are chosen because that higher aspect of ourselves knows that these specific relationships are needed. Perhaps it's because we have not been able to resolve problems and difficulties with them in a previous life. So that part of us, that higher aspect of ourselves, chose them to be our parents in this life so that we would have another opportunity to try to work out resolutions for the problems and difficulties with them that we have not previously been able to resolve. Remember that they must also agree to be our parents at that higher level. They must agree at that higher level to be our parents. They probably, at that same higher level, wanted the opportunity to have another chance to work things out also. Let me give you some really, really good advice at this point. I do not recommend that anyone talk to their parents or to others about such matters, however, unless they're unusually enlightened on this subject, because on a conscious level, most people have no knowledge of such things, and they might easily become upset and or misunderstand or even assume that you've lost your mind, which could create even more problems. This information is being given to you so that you might have a greater understanding of such things and therefore be able to deal with family and others more wisely. Since you're now beginning to have a better understanding of such things, if there are such difficulties with your family, it will be to your benefit to be ready to do whatever is reasonable to quietly resolve these problems that you may have with your parents or with other family members when an appropriate opportunity presents itself. Depending on the nature of the problem, it may be very helpful to take small steps in the direction of a resolution, and over a period of time, work until a satisfactory solution reaches its final conclusion, rather than trying to resolve the problem in one fell swoop or a single period of discussion. The problem at issue may have taken days, weeks, months, or even years to reach the stage of difficulty where it now resides, and it would not always be wise to insist that it must be resolved at once. Sometimes these problems cannot be easily resolved. In some instances, we cannot resolve them in this life at all, but one should do everything that one can do to be at least as blameless as possible in all such matters. It would also be worthwhile for you to keep in mind one additional piece of very important information, and that is the fact that when differences occur between people who care for each other, family members and others to whom we feel close, you might be surprised to find that the higher selves of the people involved are usually working together in cooperation to bring about the circumstances needed to allow both or all parties to have an opportunity at least to resolve the difference or differences in the proper way, so that both or all parties concerned can overcome and hopefully master the problem, learn the lesson, and put it all behind them. It's not uncommon for such cooperation to take place. When such resolutions do not take place, even though opportunity was provided by the higher selves, then they, the higher selves, will continue to work together to try to continue to give the parties involved ample opportunities at various times to find the correct solution that they, the higher selves of those involved, know is needed for the sake of both or all parties concerned. This kind of cooperation by the higher selves is not at all uncommon, especially between spouses, and those involved are very seldom aware of it on a conscious level. That is, almost never are they. By taking the time to stop and think about the fact that such a thing could be happening to you when you're having the kind of disagreement described, you may very well be able to overcome the almost instinctive urge to insist on having the matter resolved in your favor, and instead have it resolved in a spirit of cooperation and of doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing toward the other person or persons. The latter kind of resolution, when it has come from the heart, is virtually always the best by far, and it generally makes it unnecessary to continue to revisit the same problem over and over again within the same incarnation or in subsequent incarnations. Thank you for watching part 4. In our next video of the series that looks at life from a more spiritual perspective, we will continue talking about family relationships. Again, thank you.